Have you ever wondered why you were told to eat 6 to 11 servings of bread and pasta every day, but not too much fat? Or why entire generations have been told that cereal's a health food and butter is actually dangerous? And how, despite doing what we were told, that low fat, high carb, whole grains, we ended up fatter, sicker, and more confused than ever before? Well, today I'll be pulling back the curtain because the food pyramid was never based on science. Never. It was based off of religion, profit, politics, and a whole lot of sugar. We're going to get into it. This is the episode that I'm hoping gets me banned from podcasting. Welcome to Get Leaner and Live Longer with Nate Palmer, the show for busy people who want to maximize their energy, burn fat, and build a body that feels as good as it looks. I'm your host, Nate Palmer. I've been a coach since 2008, and I believe that looking great and feeling unstoppable does not require hours in the gym or giving up the foods you love. This shows where I share the real strategies that help you get leaner, live longer, and unlock your $1 million body one habit, one meal, and one workout at a time. So if you're ready to cut through the noise, and I'm talking about a lot of noise, like historical noise, and you want to start finally feeling like a high performer again, then let's get it. All right. This is an episode that I've been working on for a while. It took a lot of research, took a lot of like putting together the pieces. I was honestly treating it like a geometry proof. By the way, I did so good at geometry and I was so bad at algebra. I took algebra 6 times, took geometry once, got a like a B or an A in it. Pretty good. But I love the idea of like proofs because it's like, if this, then this, then this, then this final concept. It's hard to argue with it. So I wanted to put together something that was actually compelling. That wasn't just me like spouting off into a microphone about how I don't like cornflakes, but so this took a minute. I'm hoping that it makes sense and you get something from it, because I wanted to unpack kind of where we get our data around food and how it's not necessarily based off of our health. Because the food pyramid did not start in a lab. It didn't start with people measuring and titrating and figuring out what are the best foods that we should be eating. It started in a church. Crazy, right? Harvey Kellogg. We've heard of him. We've heard of Kellogg's. He was a doctor. He was a health reformer, in quotes, and he was actually a devout Seventh-day Adventist. He was lived in the late 1800s. And the Seventh-day Adventist Church believed strongly in abstinence, temperance, and purity, especially when it came to food and sex. Harvey Kellogg actually was in a sexless marriage for like 44 years or something like that. Him and his wife apparently never had sex. He also ran this something called the Battle Creek Sanitarium in Michigan, which was like part wellness retreat center, part religious indoctrination center. His mission was to cure people of disease through vegetarianism, abstinence, and enemas. He would write extensively on the dangers of masturbation, leading that it led to illness, degeneracy, and even death. And what does this have to do with the food pyramid? Like, I just want to set this up. I want to talk a little bit about the behind the scenes here, so you can actually get a feel for like where this actually came from. We will get back to it. I'm not just trying to talk about masturbation, except for just a little bit. So to combat the illness, degeneracy, and death, he would promote bland foods, especially grains and a vegetarian diet, as a way to suppress sexual urges. But the sanitarium was not just a vegetarian spa. It was a like bizarre medical center that did crazy things to its patients. People were subjected to what Kellogg called biologic living, which included extreme hydrotherapy, ice cold water baths, which, that's back. We're back to that. Mechanical vibrating chairs, light baths, and daily enemas, like lots of enemas, lots and lots of enemas. Kellogg believed that most disease originated in the colon, so he advocated for multiple daily colonics, sometimes with yogurt introduced into the rectum to repopulate the good bacteria. Maybe we're back to that too. Who knows? This is crazy. Also, women were sometimes treated with electrotherapy and mechanical pelvis massages to relieve that very specific woman disease, hysteria, which is really just when women haven't had an orgasm in decades and are a little bit frustrated. And men were like, that's hysteria. Let's send them to a medical wellness spa. By the way, the vibrators actually came from these pelvic massages that were given to women because it actually gave them orgasms and allowed them to feel a little better. Anyways, that's crazy, right? But even crazier is that men with sexual urges were often encouraged to undergo circumcision in their teenage years or adulthood without anesthesia. Like that was a cure for masturbation. Crazy. Okay. These practices were fringe, but they were widely celebrated at Battle Creek. So they served over 100,000 people in its prime, including major historical figures: Henry Ford, Amelia Earhart, Thomas Edison. All of them went there. As the dietary ideas that emerged from Battle Creek didn't just stay there either. Kellogg's sister-in-law, Lena Cooper, she was also a devout Seventh-day Adventist. She trained underneath him at Battle Creek, and then she went on to co-found the American Dietetic Association. So that's where we get a lot of our dietetic advice, our dietary guidelines. This was in 1917. And through Lena Cooper's influence, these Seventh-day Adventist dietary beliefs about vegetarianism, abstinence from meat, abstinence from stimulants, low fat, abstinence from anything that is like beyond bland, anything that's spicy or savory or could trigger our urges. These were embedded into the early frameworks of nutrition science in America. So to this day, the Adventist Church still actually will fund influential food policy researches. And there's a lot of schools like Loma Linda that are cited in tons of plant-based longevity studies. And it's not that the data is necessarily wrong. It's that the agenda behind that data has never been neutral. And I think that is important to consider. That like, where is the agenda? Who is profiting from us eating or behaving in a certain way? And I think that's what I wanted to really unpack with this episode. So moving past Battle Creek and the American Dietetic Association, let's talk about the USDA, the United States Department of Agriculture, because most people don't really understand what it is or how it operates. So the USDA has a dual mandate. So it does do two things. On one hand, it's supposed to promote the health and well-being of Americans through nutrition guidelines, right? And on the other hand, it exists to support American farmers and agricultural businesses. That means the same organization that writes the dietary rules for 330 million people is also in charge of boosting sales of corn, soy, wheat, and other industrial crops. Feels like textbook conflict of interest. So when the USDA pushes for more grain consumption, it's not always about health. It's also about economics, about clearing the supply of subsidized crops and propping up a massive agricultural system that we have in the United States. So from the very start, nutrition advice was never truly neutral. It was a political tool. So in the 1970s, America was facing a growing heart disease epidemic. The government stepped in to help by crafting the first set of national dietary guidelines. But again, the agency responsible wasn't the Center for Disease Control. It wasn't a university. It wasn't an independent board of nutrition experts or a think tank or anything like that. It was the USDA. Same agency with a vested interest in selling more wheat, corn, and soy. And in 1977, the McGovern Committee, who was responsible for coming up with dietary goals for the United States, they released their first set of dietary prescriptions. It recommended reducing fat intake and increasing consumption of carbohydrates, especially grains. Why grains, though? You might be asking why grains? It's because America had a massive surplus. Post-World War II farming advancements and subsidies had led to a ton of overproduction of these crops. There were literal warehouses filled with grain mountains in government storage. So we needed to eat the excess or the system would collapse and we'd waste a ton of valuable resources in terms of food. So behind the scenes, though, lobbyists for the grain industries, for the cereal companies, and processed food manufacturers were actively influencing these guidelines. According to some internal memos from the USDA, they faced pressure not just to recommend reducing meat and dairy. So instead, they focused on reducing fat, especially saturated fat from animals, and increasing their plant-based carbs. So the food pyramid that emerged in 1992 showed bread, cereal, rice, pasta as the base, 6 to 11 servings per day of a healthy food diet, not because of science, but because it fit the economic agenda. So we've always been getting played in this arena. So I feel like this just allows us to kind of peek behind the curtain and start seeing what's actually been going on, where we've just been told to do something, but we didn't necessarily know the reasoning behind it. So now if you can actually see the reasoning and why certain things are in place, it gives us a better idea of what we need to be doing to actively take a massive role in our own health. So, but let's keep tracking. Let's follow the money a little bit more. So after World War II, the US government began heavily subsidizing staple crops, what they call corn, wheat, and soy. through what's called the Farm Bill. So between 1995 and 2020, over $400 billion in subsidies were paid out, with corn alone receiving more than $116 billion. So these crops became the backbone of processed food. Not just processed food, but if you go into any grocery store, something close to like between 85 and 90% of the foods and products you find in a grocery store are going to have some sort of corn element to them. So corn was actually then turned into high fructose corn syrup, which made sugar a lot less expensive and even more palatable. Soy became soy oil, filler, additives. Wheat got milled into ultra refined flour and became a ton of processed foods, everything you see in boxes, bags, and cans. And with subsidies keeping these prices artificially low, food companies had every incentive to use these ingredients in literally everything they were putting out because it helped with their bottom line. It helped increase their profit margins because the food prices were low on these corns. So they're basically like, we have a ton of this stuff. Can you guys put this out and make people eat it? And they were like, bet. So that's when we started getting that sugar, the fat, and the salt and combining these things to make these hyper palatable, highly processed foods. And that's where big food kind of steps in. So General Mills, Kellogg's, Nabisco's, all the major cereal and snack food companies, they started raking in billions of dollars promoting these low-fat grain-based foods. This is in the 1980s. So because fat was demonized, sales of cereals, granola bars, and fat-free cookies skyrocketed during that time period. And it wasn't by accident either. Going back to like post-World War II, when a lot of this stuff happened, in 1948, Procter & Gamble donated $1.7 million, which is probably like 47 billion in today's money. I don't know. I didn't do the math. But they donated 1.7 million in 1948 to the American Heart Association. And that single donation transformed the American Heart Association from this small group of physicians into a national policy influencer. Now you might be asking yourself, why would a soap and oil company fund heart research? It's because they were selling Crisco at the time, which is a hydrogenated vegetable oil they wanted to position as a healthier option than butter. And when you take massive payouts like that, you kind of got to play along. So the American Heart Association launched a campaign against saturated fat that coincided with a sharp rise in seed oil consumption as well. Companies like Coca-Cola and Pepsi also funded studies claiming sugar wasn't responsible for obesity or diabetes, which again, who has the vested interest in seeing people believe or purchase in a certain way? Some other internal documents later revealed that the Sugar Research Foundation, which is now called the Sugar Association, paid scientists in the 60s to downplay sugar's role in heart disease and to blame saturated fat instead. And it worked. One of the greatest PR campaigns of all time. So this low-fat, high-carb model became gospel, started flooding schools, hospitals, government cafeterias, TV commercials, and we're still seeing the downstream effects of that right now. Not just in terms of health, but also in terms of what is offered in schools. If you go into a hospital, you will see none of that food looks like it is going to make people healthier. You see fries and fried chicken and sugary sodas and high carb energy drinks. The vending machines are packed with that stuff that is absolutely going to degrade your health rather than improve it. And this worked because it made billions and billions of dollars. In 1990, General Mills' cereal division alone, just their cereal, pulled in over $4 billion. In the 90s, Frito-Lay, which is a Pepsi brand, launched dozens of low-fat snacks in the 90s and became a $10 billion brand. And then the soy industry exploded as well. U.S. soy production increased over 500% from the 1950s to today. And so these corporations, these governmental agencies were never focused on our health. They were always about moving product, literally no different from other people that move product. That's a drug dealer thing. So what happened when we followed the pyramid? I mean, it's not rocket science. We got fatter, we got sicker, we got more diabetic. Obesity rates went from 1980 to 2020, tripled. Type 2 diabetes exploded, and heart disease stayed the number one killer. Margarine didn't work. So when we replaced butter with Crisco, we replaced steak with cereal, We replaced all of like the ancestral wisdom about eating with governmental food charts. And to this day, school lunches, hospital meals, and public nutrition programs still follow these outdated, grain heavy, low fat models because the system never got reformed. It just got institutionalized because people were making money off of it. If this makes you mad, good. I think it should make you mad because I'm pretty upset about it because we were lied to, and not by some like shadowy cabal of people who are trying to make us sick and weak, but by people and institutions that were supposed to protect us. It's the same thing that we've been dealing with forever. It's just the pursuit of profits over people. But here's the good news. Once you see this game, you don't have to play it anymore. Once you see behind the curtain, you can opt out. You don't need 11 servings of grains. You don't need to avoid fat. And you sure as hell don't need to trust the USDA with your health. Instead, make sure you're getting plenty of protein. Get some plants on the side, healthy fats on top, a little bit of fruits on as well. And maybe eat like your great grandparents. I know this is a silly thing because I feel like a lot of times people will be like, well, if you can't pronounce it, don't eat it. And I have trouble pronouncing a lot of words. Dehydrated, very difficult for me to pronounce. But if your great grandma wouldn't recognize the food on your plate, that's a pretty good guideline to live by to avoid that food. If she's going to look at that and be like, what are you eating? Then maybe just, wait on that. So eat like your great grandparents and not like a 1992 marketing campaign. And if I appreciate you listening to this, I feel like a bit of a rant. So if this blew your mind or pissed you off, share it with someone you care about. We need more people who are seeing behind the curtain and waking up to the truth about how our food system came about and allowing us to change the frameworks that which we operate from. So instead of just looking at things and being like, yes, that's how we are supposed to eat, taking a step back and being like, why is that? Why are we eating in that way? Why are we prioritizing these foods? Where is this coming from? And hopefully giving you a little bit of a look behind the curtain and seeing where the money was flowing makes a difference. So if you get a chance, share with someone else who would benefit from it. And make sure you're subscribed if you're not already. But thanks so much for listening. This has been Get Leaner and Live Longer with me, Nate Palmer. I'll see you next time.